Yeah, there's definitely some smoke with the AJ Henning situation. He entered the portal today, and just for the record, and I said this on Twitter, there was talk last January that Henning may enter the portal then, and so at that point, even before he was in the portal, I had someone reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm hearing that Henning is a possibility to Iowa." So of course he never ended up entering the portal. Andrel Anthony enters. I think what did he end up at Notre Dame?
Oklahoma.
Um, Oklahoma. Okay. But Henning entering when he did, I mean, it seems like a match made in heaven. I mean, it's going to be weird if that happens. It's going to be weird. Basically, I shouldn't say three of Iowa's top four, but three of Iowa's top 4 or 5 skill players will have come from
Yeah.
Michigan.
Well, anyone who wants to consider Iowa is looking at a double-edged sword. On one hand, the optimistic look is I've got an opportunity to be a star. I've got an opportunity to be the man at this position at wide receiver. They are void of wide receivers. I don't want to disrespect Nico Reganey and other players there, but him in particular. So I'm overstating that, but there's opportunity there, obviously. But on the flip side, do I want to go to Iowa and not see the football and not be given opportunities because of the style of offense? So that's what's to be, leveraged by the particular player weighing Iowa.
Well, let me tell you something right now. I was at that spring scrimmage on Saturday, Mark,
Yeah, and
and
sorry to interrupt, Corey, because you did mention the weather when you first jumped on, and now you're mentioning the spring scrimmage. So I did get it. I did see your short from just outside the stadium, and you looked mighty frigid. I thought like
well,
it
yeah,
was suddenly like 18 degrees, and it was like January 12th in Iowa.
we had wind chills in the 20s on
Oh,
Saturday, and we had grapple falling, which is basically little balls of ice falling from the sky,
yes.
Mark. So, anyways, yeah, it was not but you know what? It seems like that happens every year at Kids Day, or it's not. Excuse me, not Kids Day, at the spring scrimmage. So it was not great weather-wise, but as you saw in that video, I came prepared. So a couple things about Saturday, and I did a 2.5 hour live show after the practice, but I've had a couple of days to reflect now. That what we saw Saturday, lots of positives. Don't get me wrong, and I led with that on Saturday. Tight end room, I do think collectively, Mark. I've been hesitant to say this on your show, but now that I've seen him in person, I think I can confidently say this. I think collectively the tight end room at Iowa is better than it's been since at least Fant Hawkinson, and that was hard for me to say prior to watching him in
Hmm.
person, because how do you say that when you lose a guy like Sam Laporta and the production he's brought? But just top to bottom, I mean, they have obviously all in Lachey are your projected starters, but Steven Stilianos is a guy, the only transfer they brought in last year via the portal. He didn't really play much last year. He's got 1 year left, was very productive, albeit at Lafayette. But he looked the part, big dude. And then Addison Estring is another year older, a freshman from last year. It's sophomore this year, of course, but last year as a freshman came on and didn't enroll early, just kind of hit camp and ran with it. And so he's come along. And I mean, you're talking 4 guys. My guess is if I had to put odds on a school, Iowa would be at the top right now without I have not talked to anybody that knows AJ personally, but given the scuttlebutt that was out there in January, given the connection to Cade, and also given the fact, Mark, let me give Iowa the benefit of the doubt for a second, given the fact that there have been some big names at wide receiver entering the portal over the last week, and Iowa hasn't been connected to a single one. That almost tells me, like, I'm not defending that, but that almost tells me that they kind of had an idea this was coming. I would not be shy. I mean, obviously, it's not tampering if Cade McNamara is talking to AJ Henning or if Eric All is talking to AJ Henning. So I'm not saying it's a lock. I'm not saying it's a done deal. It may not happen, but would not be shocked if it does. With that being said, that shouldn't end Iowa's search for wide receiver talent, because that room, I mean, I talked up the tight end room and Hayden Large. That wide receiver room is as right now. I'm trying to think of the most respectful way to put this. It's as bare as I've ever seen it. There was one scholarship wide receiver practicing on Saturday. Now, Ragaini was there. In fact, Don Patterson sat with Nico and had a long conversation on the field during practice. He did not compete due to injury, so he'll be there. He'll be your projected number one. You're going to have, several freshmen, true freshmen coming in this summer, one of which I think could play. Alex Moda, I'm high on. He's got some speed that Iowa hasn't typically had at that position. But I mean, man, as far as guys who have been here, it's Vines, Ragaini, not Jared Bowie. Jared Bowie's not here yet. Seth Anderson, the transfer from Charleston. So he just got here and he's been dinged up. And then Jacob Bostic, who is a redshirt freshman and didn't play at all last year. So that's it. They lost Brody Breck to the baseball mound, and I don't know. It's just I don't remember coming away from a practice feeling this extreme about two positions. I mean, and this, Mark. I've witnessed some poor units with this Iowa offense, but I really do think this tight end room is going to be really, really good. But man, they have got so much work to do at receiver. I don't think you can. I'll get your opinion. I don't think you can possibly survive at this level with just a couple of good tight ends. And people may say, well, they did it with Fant and Hawkinson. I mean, they did have Smith Marset, Brandon Smith. Those guys are at least adequate. They don't have anybody who's proven right now besides Nico Ragaini, who's dinged up. And I just it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks to see if Iowa can land like Henning, or maybe they'll go after somebody else. I think they need to go after two guys at least at that position, and figure out ways to utilize all. Well, I shouldn't say all. It's hard to utilize 4 tight ends, but as many as you can, because it's probably the strongest group in the field on that side of the ball.
Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm talking Iowa football. Corey and I get together every Tuesday and have a special edition post-spring talk with Coach Don Patterson that you can see here on the main channel or over on the Iowa channel, 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central on Tuesday. So make a point to join us then. So a couple things here, Corey, as you talk about the wide receiver situation. So if they don't get AJ Henning, what does that say about their, and by all accounts, you don't believe that they've pursued these other wide receivers who have been available?
I'm just going by the reports from like the On3 guys who are literally like texting these recruits like their boyfriend, girlfriend. Like, it's ridiculous how much these guys contact these recruits like hours after they enter the portal. Jordan Hudson gives us exclusive 15-team list of what schools have contacted. He's got like Arkansas Pine Bluff on the list. So these guys are on top of it, for better or for worse. And I just know Jacob Hudson, the kid from, or Jordan Hudson, whatever his first name is, former 5-star from TCU. I did see Crystal Ball, I think it was earlier today, that he might be on his way to SMU. He had a lot of major schools contact him, Georgia included. I think Penn State was in on him, Michigan State. Iowa was not on the list, and he reported schools from Georgia to Arkansas Pine Bluff. So you would think he would include Iowa if Iowa contacted him. The kid from Colorado, you tagged me in, Montana, whatever his name is, had a big spring game, of course, on national television the other day. He just entered the portal this morning, and there's already a list. I think On3 reported a list of like 15 schools that have reached out to him. Iowa not on the list. So, I mean, the only other explanation I have, other than, hey, they're confident they already have somebody lined up, the only other explanation I have is we have a defeatist attitude as it relates to recruiting. And you and I have talked about that in the past. I even had somebody reach out to me, and I think this is the divide that we're still dealing with, despite the fact that Iowa did go out and get Cade McNamara via the portal. I had somebody reach out to me or comment on a video earlier today and say, hey, I heard what you said about not pursuing the kid from TCU, but have you considered the fact that maybe Iowa finally has some self-awareness and they realize they don't have any chance with a guy like Hudson? And I'm thinking, that's not the type of self-awareness that any of us have ever advocated for.
No.
Okay. They've always had that kind of self-awareness. Iowa has recruited with a semi-defeatist attitude for a long, long time. I know of kids, I can think of one specific, I won't say who, but there's a specific kid on this team right now that Iowa basically they weren't even going to recruit the kid. He said that didn't have a chance. And a coach that no longer is with the team, but is still works closely with the team, he kind of put a plug in for this kid and said, no, I think you guys need to pursue him because he is interested in Iowa. They had to know that this kid was interested in Iowa for them to actually pursue him. So I think that's kind of the mindset. We feel like, well, we got to utilize our assets wisely and time is of the essence. That's kind of how I perceive how Iowa goes about recruiting, especially with the portal. So if they feel like they're not going to be able to land a kid like Hudson or any of these kids from Colorado, they're just not going to try. And I don't like that, but there's obviously some people who understand that line of thinking. And so if it ends up they don't have anybody lined up and they're scrambling in June and July to try to find somebody, add somebody late out of the portal, then that tells me we just have a very big problem with having a defeatist attitude recruiting. And I get it. Like we've talked about it. Why would Iowa be an attractive place for a wide receiver? I understand that line of thinking, and I think it's right on par. But we also said the same thing about quarterback, and they went out and grabbed one of the better quarterbacks in the portal during the offseason, whether it was because of NIL or not. They were able to land Cade McNamara. So I don't understand the logic that we shouldn't go after a marquee receiver in the transfer portal simply because we don't think we're going to be able to land him. I mean, he's got opportunity. He's going to be playing for a team who is the contender in the division, probably the favorite in the division. And, he's got a proven quarterback in Cade McNamara throwing to him. So, I mean, yeah, there is the negative that is the offense and how it operates and the fact that it's run heavy and it's just not very good. And you don't have a very good play caller or a wide receiver coach who's proven. But there are also a lot of positives. And I hope that that's not the case, that that's not how I was approaching recruiting in the portal at that position. But like I said, we'll find out. My guess is if Henning's coming here, it's going to be like Cade McNamara wasn't in the portal very long. My guess is Henning will, if that's what's been happening, if he's been talking with Cade and talking with Eric, my guess is that will happen sooner rather than later.
Well, the resources are limited for every team, for every school. And the time's limited. So yes, if I found out that Iowa was pursuing the top 10 players in the nation coming out of high school next year, I would tip my cap to them for being that bold. But that would be a waste of time to try to grab the number one player out of the state of Florida, for example.
Sure.
I get that. There's reserve there that is wise. However, we're talking about the transfer portal. These kids are going everywhere and anywhere. And again, I just think that they could capitalize on the void of wide receivers at that level of school, that level of football program, to say, hey, come play for us. You will be the number one receiver, or we'll be the one or two guy on this team. And there's no question. The second leading receiver at Colorado jumped into the transfer portal not long after the number one guy did.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that. And I mean, I'd be very, very concerned if I'm a Buff fan, but yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I there's always a possibility that certain guys have baggage. I understand that. Sure. But I also don't buy into the idea that all these guys that Iowa chooses not to even contact have baggage that they somehow know about that other schools like Georgia and Penn State don't. So, I feel like it's just the same conversation we had, and I got ripped for it by certain people, even certain people in the media. I got ripped for basically being a guy who promotes that Iowa should go after each and every player in the portal. Well, when you're this destitute at a position, that's the, I understand there's more involved, but like beggars can't be choosers. I'd be putting that worm in front of every single fish in the portal and, seeing who bites. And if nobody bites, then fine. And it'd be different too if we heard that Iowa was after a couple other players and they chose not to contact these guys from Colorado or the guy from TCU, but we haven't heard them linked to anybody yet. I do think Henning is going to be on that list. I think he's already been linked. So, maybe that's the explanation for it.
Yeah. Well, the three guys we're talking about would be factors in the Iowa passing game. They would be guys that would play.
Yeah.
So they at least need to be contacted to see what their level of interest is.
Well, and again, like I said, Mark, they have 4 scholarship wide receivers, 2 of which have never, or as of right now, before we get to summer, 4 scholarship wide receivers, 2 of which have never set foot on the field, at least on offense at this level, in Seth Anderson and Jacob Bostic. I don't even know if Bostic, maybe he played a little on special teams last year, but I mean, think about that. Is that not startling to you?
Absolutely, it's
I mean,
startling. But
everybody else is
now
a walk-on. We got a bunch of Iowa walk-ons.
now when you bring up the tight end position being that that valuable, that strong, now do any of those players have the body type or the skill set to kind of split them out, not necessarily to transfer them into a wide receiver, but to play more of the, the new style of, wide receiver that splits out wide?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, they did that a little bit with Sam Laporta last year, which I thought kind of took Laporta out of his natural element as a guy you line up inside. And I mean, Sam Laporta is he's a terrific athlete, but I'd rather him lined up as a traditional tight end. But I think you're right. They're going to have to figure out a way to mix and match. I think Eric All is probably the logical guy. He's very smooth. I mean, he didn't go full contact Saturday, but he's got really soft hands. That's one thing that one of the coaches said during the practice on Saturday is Eric's just got really, really soft hands. He's a crisp route runner. Obviously got great athleticism. They're not going to do that with Stylianos. He's if people haven't seen Steven Stylianos, he is a big dude. He's kind of like a slightly shorter version of maybe like a CJ Fedorowicz. Again, I think he's got an opportunity to play and contribute, especially on goal line sets. And he played a little bit last year on the goal line, but probably All and maybe a Stringa. A Stringa I know a lot of these guys play wide receiver in high school, so I understand there's a difference. But he played a lot of wide receiver in high school. And he looks like the type of guy who, he's maybe not as big as he'd like to be as an Iowa tight end, but maybe he could use that to his advantage if they line him out, flank him out, and I don't know, spread the field a little bit with these tight ends. I think you're limited, though. I still don't buy into the idea of, well, we got 4 tight ends. We can just, run out a bunch of 3 tight end sets and, have Hayden Large catching out of the backfield. I still think you're limited, right? I mean, if it were that easy, Iowa's offense would have been a lot better last year because they had 2 really good tight ends. So they still got to get receivers. I think there's a serious issue if they go to the portal and get nobody. We got problems, and I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, they'll get somebody, and whoever
you don't say that with a lot of confidence. They'll get somebody.
Well, they have to. I mean, like I said, they have to. You cannot do this.